I let my fiancé's dying ex-husband move in, then I found texts that exposed their entire plan. She told him our wedding felt like a lie. And that being with him felt more real, so I packed my bags. I'm Oliver, 29 male, and my world fell apart when I discovered my fiancée was having an emotional affair with her dying ex-husband, whom I had agreed to let live with us. The decision to open our home was supposed to be an act of compassion, a final gesture of peace for a man facing his last months. For me, it felt like the right thing to do, the kind of moral choice that solidifies the foundation of a future marriage. For my fiancée, Mara, it turned out to be an opportunity. An opportunity to resurrect a relationship I was told was long dead and buried, and in doing so, to shatter the life we had promised to build together. Mara and I met 3 years ago. At 33, she was 4 years my senior, a brilliant and driven software engineer with a sharp wit and a smile that could disarm armies. I was an architect, someone who believes in structure, in blueprints, in the idea that with careful planning and a strong foundation, you can build something beautiful and lasting. Mara felt like the final, essential component of my life's design. Our relationship was a whirlwind of genuine connection. We traveled, we laughed, we supported each other's careers, and when she proposed to me on the anniversary of our first date, saying yes was the easiest decision I had ever made. I knew about her ex-husband, Isaac. It was impossible not to. Theirs had been a youthful, passionate, and ultimately turbulent marriage that ended 5 years before I ever came into the picture. According to Mara, it was a fire that had simply burned too bright and too fast, leaving them both scorched. She spoke of him with a sort of fond melancholy, the way one might remember a favorite book from their childhood that they know they can never read again for the first time. We were different people then, she would say, shrugging. We wanted different things. He was a freelance writer, a dreamer, and I was becoming me. I accepted her past as she accepted mine. It was history and our future was unwritten. But the ghost of Isaac, even before his diagnosis, had a way of drifting into our present. There were small things, moments that felt insignificant at the time but now in hindsight glitter like shards of broken glass. The first time I felt a prickle of unease was about a year into our relationship. We were at a street fair and Mara spotted a vendor selling vintage band t-shirts. She let out a gasp and rushed over, pulling out a faded shirt for a band I'd never heard of. "Oh my God," she breathed, her eyes shining with a nostalgic light I had never seen before. "Isaac and I saw them on our first real date," he crowd-surfed. "It was the most ridiculous, wonderful thing I'd ever seen." She bought the shirt. She never wore it, but she kept it folded in the back of her drawer, a small, soft relic of a life before me. I told myself it was harmless. The second instance was more direct. We were hosting a small dinner party with some of our friends. One of Mara's oldest friends, who had known both her and Isaac, was telling a story about a disastrous camping trip. And then Isaac, in his infinite wisdom, her friend laughed, tries to prove he can light a fire with nothing but 2 sticks. 2 wet sticks, I might add. "Mara, do you remember the look on your face?" Everyone chuckled, but Mara's expression was distant. "He was always so stubborn," she said, her voice soft. "He'd rather freeze than admit he was wrong." There was no bitterness in her tone, only a deep, familiar understanding. It felt less like she was talking about an ex and more like she was describing a part of herself. I felt a strange pang of jealousy, not for the man, but for the shared history, a language I would never speak. The most telling event, the one I should have paid more attention to, happened 6 months before the cancer diagnosis. We were discussing our wedding plans, specifically the location. I wanted something modern, an art gallery or a chic industrial space. Mara was unusually quiet. "You know," she said finally, staring out the window, "Isaac and I always talked about getting married in the woods, just us, a few friends under the trees." She turned to me and gave a little laugh as if shaking herself from a daydream. "Silly, I know we ended up in a stuffy courthouse, but it was a nice thought." She quickly agreed to my idea for the gallery, but the image of her wistful expression stayed with me. She wasn't just reminiscing, she was mourning a dream that didn't include me. So when the call came, the one that changed everything, I was already subconsciously aware that Isaac wasn't just a chapter in her past, he was a book she hadn't finished reading. Mara came to me, her face pale, her phone still clutched in her hand. "It's Isaac," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He has cancer, pancreatic. They're saying he has less than a year." In that moment, all my petty insecurities vanished, replaced by a wave of profound sympathy. This wasn't about us anymore. A man was facing his own mortality. He had no close family left, his parents having passed away years ago. Mara told me he was alone in a small, grim apartment, his freelance career having long since failed to provide any real stability. He was going to start an aggressive course of chemotherapy, and he was terrified. I looked at Mara, at the genuine pain and fear in her eyes for her first love, and I made the offer. "He should stay with us," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I had even fully processed them. "He shouldn't be alone right now. We have the guest room. He can be comfortable here. We can help him." Mara's relief was palpable. She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice muffled. "Oh, Oliver, are you really sure? It would mean the world to him, to me." Of course, I'm sure, I said, holding her tight, feeling like a good and decent man. I was her future, and I was strong enough to help her tend to the wounds of her past. I believed our foundation was solid enough to bear the weight of this unexpected storm. I had no idea that I wasn't reinforcing our home, but inviting in a demolition crew. Isaac moved in on a gray, drizzly Tuesday, a day that perfectly matched the somber mood of his arrival. He looked smaller and more fragile than the man I had pictured from Mara's stories. The vibrant, stubborn dreamer had been replaced by a pale, weary man with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and deep-seated fear. He carried one small suitcase, and his gratitude toward me was almost painful to witness. "Oliver," he said, shaking my hand with a grip that was surprisingly firm. "I don't have words, thank you, you're a better man than I am." I brushed it off with a polite smile, assuring him it was the least we could do. For the first week, things were exactly as I had imagined. It was a strange, quiet cohabitation, a triangle of care and awkwardness. I would make breakfast for everyone before heading to my firm. Mara, who worked from home, would make sure Isaac was comfortable and had everything he needed for the day. I would come home to find them watching old movies or quietly reading in the living room, a respectful distance between them. It felt like we were doing a good deed, a difficult but necessary act of human kindness. I felt proud of us, proud of Mara, proud of myself. The wedding was still 5 months away, and this felt like a testament to the strength of our bond. But then the shift began. It wasn't a sudden earthquake, but a slow, almost imperceptible tilt in the axis of our home. It started with the food. Mara had always loved my cooking. We took turns making dinner, enjoying the ritual of creating a meal together. But Isaac's chemotherapy ravaged his appetite and made him sensitive to certain smells. Suddenly, the garlic and onions I loved were banished. My weekend paella was out of the question. Instead, Mara began cooking bland, simple broths and plain toast, the only things Isaac could keep down. "He's just having a rough day," she'd say apologetically when I'd offer to cook something separately for us. "It's easier if I just make one thing," so we all ate broth. I told myself it was a small sacrifice. Next came the inside jokes. They were like a secret coded language resurfacing between them. One evening, I was telling a story about a difficult client, and I used the phrase, "It's a real pickle." Mara and Isaac exchanged a quick, knowing glance, and Isaac let out a weak chuckle. "A pickle, huh?" he said. Mara smiled, a genuine, unreserved smile that I hadn't seen in weeks. "Remember the pickle jar?" she asked him. He nodded, his eyes crinkling. "How could I forget? You almost broke your hand." They both laughed, a shared bubble of memory that I couldn't penetrate. I just stood there, my own story forgotten. "What pickle jar?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mara just waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's a stupid old story, not even funny, really." But it was funny to them, and I was on the outside. Our evenings, which used to be our sacred time, were now dedicated to Isaac. Our plans to go out to a new restaurant or meet friends were indefinitely postponed. "He can't be left alone after his treatment," Mara would explain. "He gets so weak." I suggested we hire a part-time nurse or ask a service for help, but Mara was adamant. "No, Oliver, I need to be the one to do this. I owe him that much." The concept of what she owed him began to expand daily, encroaching on what she owed us, our relationship, our future. The physical space began to change too. Isaac's things, initially confined to the guest room, started to migrate. A special blanket he liked was now permanently draped over the armchair I usually sat in. His medications and bottles of water crowded the kitchen counter. His favorite brand of tea replaced mine in the cupboard. It was a slow, creeping invasion, and with every item that found a new home, I felt my own presence in the house diminish. I was becoming a guest in the life I was building. The most jarring change was in Mara herself. The confident, independent woman I loved was being replaced by a full-time caregiver, but it was more than that. She was softer around Isaac, her voice taking on a gentle, nurturing cadence I had rarely heard. She would anticipate his needs before he even spoke, bringing him a glass of water, adjusting his pillow, or just sitting with him in comfortable silence. It was a level of intimacy that felt different from simple caregiving. It was deeply familiar, instinctual. It was the intimacy of a spouse. I tried to talk to her about it one night. We were in our bedroom, the only space that still felt truly ours. "Mara," I started, choosing my words carefully, "I'm so glad we can be here for Isaac. I am, but I miss you, I miss us." She looked up from her laptop, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean, I'm right here?" "No, you're not," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not really. It feels like all your energy is going to him. We don't talk anymore, we don't touch. It's like we're just roommates." A defensive wall immediately went up. "Oliver, what do you expect? My ex-husband is dying in our guest room. I'm sorry if I'm not in the mood for a date night. I'm exhausted. I'm stressed. I thought you, of all people, would understand." Her words were a slap in the face. She was right, of course. How could I be so selfish? A man was fighting for his life down the hall. My need for a date night seemed pathetic in comparison. I immediately backtracked, apologizing for being insensitive. "You're right," I said, feeling ashamed. "I'm sorry, I love you." I love you too, she said, but her eyes were already back on her screen and I knew the conversation was over. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, feeling a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I had understood that we were taking on a burden. What I hadn't understood was that I was expected to carry it alone, while she ran back into the arms of a shared past, leaving me to fend for our future by myself. The house was no longer tilted, it had completely capsized and I was drowning. The weeks bled into a month and then two. The dynamic in our home solidified into a new, unbearable normal. I was the provider, the stable pillar holding up the structure, while Mara and Isaac were the inhabitants living in a world of their own making. I paid the bills, I did the grocery shopping from a list of bland, Isaac-approved foods, and I maintained the semblance of an ordinary life for the outside world. Inside, I was a ghost, haunting the hallways of my own home. My architectural projects, once a source of passion, became a welcome escape, a place where I could impose order and design on a world that felt increasingly chaotic and out of my control. I worked late, not because I had to, but because I dreaded coming home. The red flags, once small and sporadic, were now giant banners waving in my face daily. Our wedding, once a source of joyful planning, became a taboo subject. Whenever I tried to bring it up to confirm a vendor to discuss invitations, Mara would wave me away with a tired sigh. Oliver, can we not do this right now? It just feels wrong to be planning a celebration when Isaac is so sick. He told us he wants to see us get married, I reminded her gently one evening. He said it would bring him peace. This was true. In one of his more lucid moments, Isaac had said exactly that, his voice raspy but sincere. Mara's expression hardened. Well, maybe he was just saying that to be nice. It feels frivolous. I think we should postpone it. The words hung in the air between us, cold and heavy. Postpone it, I repeated, my voice hollow. Mara, our wedding is in 3 months, everything is booked, our families have made plans. So we'll unbook it, she said, her tone sharp, final. We can do a small courthouse thing later, maybe next year. It's just a party, Oliver. What's more important, a party or being here for a dying man? She had weaponized my compassion. She was using Isaac's tragedy as a shield for her own desires, framing any objection I had as a profound moral failing. To argue for our wedding was to argue against her noble sacrifice. To want our life to move forward was to be selfish and cruel. I felt trapped, silenced by the unassailable logic of her position, so I just nodded, a knot of anger and hurt tightening in my chest. Okay, I said quietly, if that's what you want. Our wedding, the symbol of our future, was officially cancelled, and she hadn't even truly asked me. She had informed me. Her secrecy, especially with her phone, escalated dramatically. It used to be a communal object left on the coffee table or the kitchen counter. Now it was permanently attached to her like a vital organ. She took it with her to every hour. And it was always placed face down. When a text message would buzz, she would snatch it up, her shoulders tensing as she angled the screen away from my view. The easy transparency we once shared was gone, replaced by a guarded privacy that felt both sudden and absolute. The feeling of being a third wheel became my constant state of being. I would walk into the living room to find them engrossed in a quiet conversation that would immediately cease the moment I entered. Their shared history was a fortress, and I didn't have the key. They would reminisce about their old apartment, their disastrous honeymoon, the cat they once shared. Each story was a brick in the wall being built between Mara and me. One Saturday afternoon, I came home earlier than expected. As I walked down the hall, I heard Mara's voice from the guest room, but it was different. It was light, melodic, happy. She was laughing. It was a full, genuine laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from her in months. I paused outside the door, listening. You always did that, she was saying, still chuckling. You'd burn the toast and then insist it was Cajun style. I heard Isaac's weak voice respond, it was an art form, you just didn't appreciate my culinary genius. Oh, I appreciated it, Mara said, and her voice softened. I appreciated all of it, even the messes. I miss that sometimes. The silence that followed was more damning than any words. I miss you too, Mara, Isaac said, his voice thick with emotion. My heart felt like it had dropped into my stomach. It wasn't just caregiving, it wasn't just compassion, this was something else. This was a deep, emotional current flowing between them, and it was pulling her away from me. I backed away from the door silently, my hands trembling. I went into our bedroom and shut the door, the sound of her laughter echoing in my ears, a sound she no longer made for me. That night my own home felt alien. I looked at Mara as she sat on the couch, reading a book, The Picture of Normalcy. But I saw her differently now. I saw the secrets behind her eyes. I saw the ghost of the man she used to love and the terrifying possibility that she still did. I felt a desperate, clawing need to know the truth. The uncertainty was eating me alive, hollowing me out from the inside. I knew that looking through her phone was a violation, a line I had never crossed, a betrayal of the trust I thought we had. But what trust was left to betray? She had already dismantled it piece by piece with her secrets and her shared smiles and her talk of postponing our entire future. The foundation I had believed in was a lie. And I realized with a chilling certainty that I had to see what was written on the blueprints of her heart, even if it meant demolishing the last remnants of my own. The opportunity, if you could call it that, came 3 nights later. It was nearly 2 a.m. and the house was still and silent. Sleep had become a stranger to me. I would lie in bed for hours, my mind racing, replaying conversations, dissecting every glance and every word. Beside me, Mara slept soundly, exhausted from her dual role as a software engineer by day and a devoted nurse by night. Her phone was on her bedside table charging. It was face down, as always. For an hour, I just stared at it, a dark rectangle in the dim glow of the alarm clock. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of guilt and desperation. This was the point of no return. If I looked and I found nothing, I would forever be the man who broke his fiancée's trust for no reason. I would have to live with that ugliness, that paranoia. But if I found something, well, then I would have to live with that too. But at least it would be the truth. The not knowing was the real poison. It was a slow-acting acid, dissolving my sanity, my peace, my sense of self. My hand trembled as I reached out, my fingers closing around the cool, smooth glass. I lifted the phone. For a moment, I just held it, the weight of it feeling immense, biblical. My thumb hovered over the power button. I knew her passcode. We had shared it freely in the before times, a simple act of transparency. Our anniversary. The irony was a bitter pill. I typed in the 6 digits and the screen flared to life, illuminating my face in the darkness. My breath hitched. No alarms went off, no lightning struck. The world didn't end. There was just her home screen, a photo of the two of us smiling on a hike, a relic from a happier time. For a second, I almost put it back. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was a paranoid fool, driven mad by a difficult situation. But the dread, the cold certainty that had been my companion for months, pushed me forward. My thumb, moving with a will of its own, tapped on the green message icon. My eyes scanned the list of recent conversations. Friends, her mom, a work group chat, and then at the very top, a name that made my blood run cold, Isaac. It wasn't just a few messages out his medication or how he was feeling. It was a thread so long I had to scroll and scroll and scroll. My heart pounding in my ears, I opened it. The most recent messages were from that evening, after I had gone to bed. Isaac can't sleep, the pain is loud tonight. Mara, I'm so sorry, I wish I could take it away. I'm right here, just a few feet away, but it feels like miles. Isaac, it was better when you were in here earlier. Your laugh is still the best medicine. Mara, I haven't felt like laughing much lately, but with you it's easy, it's always been easy. I had to stop and take a breath, pressing the back of my hand against my mouth to stifle a sound. It was happening. It was real. I scrolled up, my movements frantic now. The messages went back weeks to the very first day he moved in. They were a secret diary of their rekindled intimacy. Isaac, this is so strange being here, in your house, his house. Mara, it's our house, and you belong here as much as anyone, don't ever feel like you don't. I scrolled further, my vision blurring. Isaac, I was thinking about that trip to the coast. The one where we slept in the car because we spent all our money on lobster. Mara, best lobster I ever had. I still have the shell we found on the beach that morning. Remember, the one shaped like a heart. Isaac, I remember everything, Mara, that's the curse of all this. I have nothing but time to remember. Mara, it's not a curse, some memories are worth keeping. And then, the messages that shattered what was left of my heart into a million irreparable pieces. They were from the day she told me she wanted to postpone the wedding. Isaac, you were quiet tonight, is everything okay? Mara, I told him about the wedding, I said we should postpone it. Isaac, Mara, you didn't have to do that. Mara, yes I did. How could I walk down an aisle toward a new future when my past, the most important part of my past, is right here hurting? It felt like a lie. Being with you even like this feels more real than planning a party. Isaac, don't say that. Mara, it's the truth. I think a part of me has been asleep for years, and now you're here and I feel awake. Is that terrible? Isaac, it's not terrible, it's just too late. Mara, is it? I dropped the phone onto the duvet as if it had burned me. A wave of nausea washed over me. Is it? That single question confirmed everything. This wasn't just reminiscing. This wasn't just closure. This was an active, ongoing emotional affair. She was questioning our entire future, weighing it against a past that was supposed to be over. She had looked me in the eye and made me feel selfish and cruel for wanting to marry her, all while she was secretly telling him that our wedding felt like a lie. I felt a profound, chilling cold seep into my bones. It was the cold of absolute betrayal. The man I had opened my home to out of pity, out of a sense of human decency, was conspiring with my fiancée to emotionally dismantle my life. And the woman I loved, the woman I had trusted with my heart and my future, had been gaslighting me for months, making me believe I was the problem. She was mourning our future while actively sabotaging it. The photo on her home screen, the two of us smiling happy, was a mockery. It was a lie. I picked up the phone again, my hand steady now, the trembling replaced by an icy resolve. I scrolled through the messages, taking screenshots of the most damning exchanges. I sent them to my own phone, the buzz of the incoming notifications on my own device sounding like a death knell for our relationship. I placed her phone back on the bedside table exactly as I had found it, face down. I slid back into my side of the bed, the space between us now an impassable chasm. I stared at her, at the woman sleeping peacefully beside me, and I felt nothing. The love, the hurt, the confusion, it had all coalesced into a single hard point of clarity. She was a stranger. And I knew with a certainty that was as painful as it was liberating that my life with her was over. The only question left was how I was going to end it. The rest of the night passed in a state of suspended animation. I didn't sleep. I lay perfectly still, my eyes open in the darkness, listening to the steady rhythm of Mara's breathing. It was a sound that had once brought me comfort, a sign that my partner was safe and close. Now it felt like the ticking of a clock, counting down the final moments of our life together. The screenshots on my phone were a toxic glow in the dark, a digital testament to the magnitude of her deceit. Every word, every shared memory, every whispered confession between her and Isaac was a separate, calculated betrayal. When the first gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, I slipped out of bed. I moved with a stealth I didn't know I possessed, showering and dressing in silence. Every action was deliberate, mechanical. I looked at my own reflection in the mirror, the arc circles under my eyes, the grim set of my jaw, and saw a stranger looking back. The hopeful, compassionate man who had opened his home to a dying man was gone. In his place was someone harder, colder, someone whose foundation had been ripped out from under him. I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't face them, not yet. I couldn't pretend to make breakfast or ask how Isaac was feeling. The thought of participating in the charade for one more minute made me physically ill. I grabbed my laptop bag, my keys, and my wallet. On a sticky note, I wrote a simple, sterile message: "Early meeting, will be home late." It was a lie, but they were fluent in that language. I left it on the kitchen counter, a space that was no longer mine, and walked out the front door without a backward glance. Instead of driving to the office, I drove to the waterfront. I parked the car and just sat there, watching the sun rise over the gray water, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. It was beautiful, but I felt nothing. The world was moving on, displaying its beauty, oblivious to the fact that mine had just imploded. I pulled out my phone and read the messages again, this time in the harsh light of day. The shock of the initial discovery had subsided, replaced by a deep, hollow ache. It wasn't just anger, it was a profound sense of loss. I wasn't just losing a fiancé, I was losing the future I had meticulously designed. The house we were going to fill with children, the trips we were going to take, the old age we were supposed to share, it all evaporated like mist on the water. It had never been real. It was a blueprint for a building that was never going to be constructed, because one of the architects had been secretly working on another project all along. She had called being with him more real than planning our wedding. She had felt awake with him. Those phrases echoed in my mind. She hadn't just cheated, she had invalidated our entire relationship. She had reduced 3 years of love and laughter and shared dreams to a state of sleepwalking, a pale imitation of the real connection she had with him. And she had done it all while accepting my support, my money, my home, and my compassion. I wasn't just a partner, I was a resource. A convenient landlord for her emotional reunion. As the sun climbed higher, the ache began to solidify into something else. Resolve. I would not be the victim in this story. I would not be the weeping, heartbroken man who gets quietly discarded. I had been made a fool of, but I would not play the part. They had conducted their affair in the shadows of my kindness, in the privacy of my own home. I decided right then and there that I would bring it all out into the light. My plan began to form, not out of a desire for petty revenge, but out of a need for control. I had lost all control of my home, my relationship, and my life. I needed to reclaim it. Confronting her in a tearful, angry outburst would give her the power. She could cry, she could rationalize, she could use Isaac's illness as a shield, just as she had been doing for months. She would paint me as the villain, the cruel man who would attack a dying man's caregiver. No, the confrontation had to be calm, methodical, and undeniable. It had to be on my terms, in a way that left no room for excuses or manipulation. I spent the day making arrangements. First, I called my best friend Mark and told him everything. Hearing myself say the words out loud, "Mara is having an emotional affair with Isaac," made them brutally real. Mark listened, his silence a testament to his shock, and then he simply said, "My spare room is yours for as long as you need it. What's the plan?" With a place to go, the next steps became clearer. I went to a bank and opened a new account in my name only. I arranged to have my next paycheck deposited there. I went online and started looking for a small apartment to rent, something just for me. These were the practical steps of separation, the unbuilding of a shared life. Each action felt like I was taking back a piece of myself. The hardest part was deciding on the confrontation itself. I knew I couldn't do it while Isaac was still in the house. I couldn't evict a man with terminal cancer. As much as he had betrayed my trust, my conscience wouldn't allow it. But I also couldn't live like this, waiting for him to pass away while they continued their secret emotional life under my roof. Then the perfect, terrible solution presented itself. Isaac had a major chemotherapy session scheduled in 2 days. It was an all-day appointment at a hospital across town. Mara always went with him, holding his hand, waiting for hours in the sterile lounge. They would be gone from at least 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That would be the day I moved out, the day I took my life back. I wouldn't confront them together. I would confront Mara when she returned, exhausted from her day of caregiving, to a home that was sud and half empty. She would come back not to her loving, supportive fiancé, but to the cold, hard reality of her choices. The evidence would be laid out not in anger but as a final, quiet statement of fact, and I would be gone. I drove back to the office late in the afternoon, my mind clear for the first time in months. The plan was in place. It was a grim, heartbreaking plan, but it was mine. I would endure 2 more days in that house, 2 more days of feigned normalcy. I would be polite, I would be distant, I would be the perfect roommate. And then I would dismantle the life we had built, pack it into boxes, and leave her alone with the ghost she had chosen over me. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I moved through our home like a phantom, my emotions locked down, my face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. I was polite but brief. I ate the simple meals Mara prepared without comment. I asked about Isaac's well-being with a detached concern that was chillingly convincing. Mara seemed to notice the shift. She'd look at me with a flicker of confusion in her eyes, as if wondering about my sudden distance, but she was too consumed by her world with Isaac to question it deeply. She probably chalked it up to me being stressed about the early meeting I'd had. The irony was almost too much to bear. The morning of the confrontation arrived, another gray, overcast day. I watched from the living room window as Mara helped a frail-looking Isaac into her car. She adjusted his seatbelt, fussed over the blanket on his lap, her movements full of the tender care she now reserved exclusively for him. From a distance, they looked like a devoted, aging couple facing a trial together. The image sent a fresh wave of cold fury through me. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner before I began. Mark arrived 10 minutes later with his truck and a stack of empty boxes. He didn't say much, just gave my shoulder a firm squeeze and asked, "Where do we start?" We worked with a grim efficiency. We started in the bedroom. I packed my clothes, my books, the framed photos from my side of the bed. Every object I touched felt like an artifact from another life. The tie she bought me for my birthday, the watch I was wearing when she proposed, I packed it all. I left her side of the room untouched, a perfect time capsule of her life before the truth came out. We moved through the house, systematically extracting my presence from it. My architectural models from the office, my favorite mug from the kitchen, my records from beside the stereo. The house began to feel cavernous, empty spaces appearing where my life used to be. The most difficult part was the living room. It was the heart of our shared life. I looked at the couch where we had spent countless nights watching movies, the rug where we had wrestled with our dog before he passed last year, the walls that had absorbed 3 years of our laughter. I was not just packing things, I was packing memories. As I took down a framed photo of us from a trip to the mountains, the very photo that was her phone's wallpaper, my composure finally cracked. Mark saw my hands shaking. "Hey," he said gently, taking the frame from me. "Let me get that, why don't you handle the kitchen?" I nodded, grateful, and turned away before he could see the tears welling in my eyes. By late afternoon, the truck was loaded. My half of our life was packed away. I walked through the now unfamiliar rooms. The house was clean, sterile, but it echoed with emptiness. It looked less like a home and more like a stage after the play has ended. Now for the final act. I went into her bedroom and laid the evidence out on the perfectly made bed. I printed the screenshots I had taken from her phone, the stark black and white text messages looking even more damning on paper. I arranged them in chronological order, a narrative of her betrayal. "Being with you feels more real than planning a party. I feel awake. Is it?" On top of the papers, I placed my key to the house. And beside the key, I placed the velvet box containing the engagement ring she had given me. It was a beautiful, custom-designed ring, a circle of white gold meant to symbolize a future that was now a fantasy. The gesture was simple, silent, and absolute. There would be no screaming match, no tearful explanations. The evidence, the key, and the ring would speak for me. Mark and I drove away just as the sun was beginning to set. As we turned onto the main road, I saw Mara's car coming the other way. My heart leaped into my throat. She didn't see me. Her focus was entirely on the road ahead, on getting home, on getting Isaac back to the sanctuary I had provided. She had no idea she was driving toward the wreckage of her own making. I spent the evening at Mark's place, staring at my phone, waiting. I had blocked her number and Isaac's, but I hadn't blocked her email. I knew it would come. The hours ticked. By 7 p.m., 8 p.m., at 9:17 p.m., the notification finally appeared. The subject line was just my name, Oliver. I opened it. It was long, a rambling, frantic torrent of words. "Oliver, where are you? I came home and everything is gone. Your clothes, your things. What is happening?" I saw the papers on the bed, the ring. Oliver, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like. You can't just leave like this. You can't do this to me, not now. Isaac is sick. He needs me. He needs us. You read my private messages. How could you do that? That was a violation. We need to talk. This is a huge misunderstanding. I was emotional. I was confused. I love you. Please, Oliver, just come home so we can talk this out. Don't throw away everything we have because of a few stupid messages. Please. Her words were a masterclass in deflection and manipulation. She was the victim. I had violated her privacy. She twisted my departure into an act of cruelty against her and a sick man. There was no apology, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the depth of her betrayal. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. My fingers trembled over the keyboard, but my response was cold and clear. I had rehearsed it in my head 100 times. Marva, there is no misunderstanding. I read your messages, and for the first time in months, I understand everything perfectly. You didn't just send a few stupid messages. You carried on an emotional affair in my home with a man I allowed in out of compassion. You told him that our life together felt like a lie. You were right, it was. You used my kindness as a cover for your infidelity. You made me feel guilty for wanting to build a future with you, all while you were secretly telling him you wished you could go back to the past. The ring and the key are not up for discussion. They are a statement of fact. We are over. Isaac's illness is tragic, but it is not an excuse. You weaponized his cancer to manipulate me and to justify your actions. My leaving is not something I am doing to you. It is the direct consequence of your choices. The house is yours. I will have a lawyer contact you regarding the formal separation of our assets. Do not try to contact me again. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The moment it was gone, I felt a profound, earth-shattering sense of relief. It was over. The lies, the secrets, the gaslighting, it was all severed with that final clean cut. I turned off my phone, leaned my head back on Mark's couch, and for the first time in months, I felt the quiet, peaceful emptiness of a future that was, for the first time, entirely my own. The days that followed were a blur of logistics and quiet grief. True to her nature, Mara did not respect my request for no contact. My phone remained off, but my email inbox filled with a predictable cycle of her messages, frantic apologies, angry accusations, desperate pleas, and finally, attempts to use Isaac's condition to guilt me into responding. Isaac's health is declining because of the stress you've caused. One particularly venomous email read. I deleted them all without a reply. My lawyer, a stern and efficient woman, handled all communication, creating an impenetrable wall that Mara could not breach. Through my lawyer, I learned that Mara and Isaac had stayed in the house. I made it clear that I wanted it sold as soon as possible. I was the primary name on the mortgage, a fact that gave me leverage. The thought of them living their tragic romance in the rooms where I had planned my future was unbearable. Mara fought it, of course, but the legal realities were on my side. Within a month, a for sale sign was hammered into the front lawn, a final, public declaration that what we had built was officially condemned. Living at Mark's place gave me the space to breathe. He was the perfect friend, offering silent companionship when I needed it and a distraction when the silence became too heavy. We watched sports, we ordered pizza, we talked about everything and nothing. I slowly began to feel like myself again, the Oliver that existed before the betrayal, before the constant anxiety and suspicion. About 2 months after I left, Mark passed me his phone with a somber look on his face. You should probably see this, he said. He had pulled up a public social media post from one of Mara's friends. It was an announcement. Isaac had passed away. The post was filled with platitudes about his brave fight and his gentle spirit. It included a photo of him and Mara taken recently in the backyard of our old house. She was holding his hand, smiling at him with an expression of pure adoration and sorrow. The caption read, "He was so lucky to have Mara by his side until the very end. A true love story." I stared at the photo, expecting to feel a surge of anger or jealousy. Instead, I felt a strange and profound pity. Pity for Isaac, whose final months were spent as a pawn in a game of emotional deceit. And pity for Mara. She had gotten what she wanted. She had been able to play the role of the devoted, loving partner to her first love in his final moments. But now he was gone, and in her quest to recapture her past, she had incinerated her future. She was left with nothing but memories, a house that was being sold out from under her, and the knowledge that she had destroyed the one person who had shown them both unconditional kindness. The sale of the house went through a few weeks later. I received my share of the equity, a sum of money that felt both like a settlement and a severance. It was the financial close to an emotional chapter. I used it as a down payment on a small, modern condo in a different part of the city, a place with no memories and a view of the skyline. It was a blank canvas. Building a new life from scratch is a slow, deliberate process, much like architecture. You start with a solid foundation. For me, that foundation was self-respect. I had chosen the truth, however painful, over a comfortable lie. I had refused to be a victim. From there, I started adding the walls, my work, which I threw myself into with renewed passion, my friendships, which I had neglected and now nurtured, and new hobbies, things that were just for me. I started hiking again. I took a cooking class, learning to make all the spicy, flavorful food I loved, and I filled my new quiet space with music and life. I don't know what happened to Mara. After the house was sold, she disappeared from my life completely. I imagine she moved on, as people do, but I suspect the ghost of what she did will haunt her far longer than the ghost of Isaac ever could. Betrayal leaves a stain not just on the betrayed, but on the betrayer. So to anyone out there listening to my story, here is what I have learned. Compassion is a beautiful thing, but it should never require you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Trust, once broken so completely, can almost never be rebuilt because the foundation itself is revealed to be sand. And finally, you can't build a future with someone who is still trying to renovate their past. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away, put down the blueprints for a life that can never be, and start drawing a new one. A smaller one maybe, but one that is honest and strong and entirely your own.